This is the Ask Faleskini podcast, where the modern economy is discussed from a skeptic's perspective. Mr. Faleskini helps you distinguish what is sustainable in our economy and what isn't. Not everything that glitters is gold, and not all mud is dirty. The podcaster Mr. Faleskini provides no-nonsense advice. He had it all, lost it all, went bankrupt multiple times, and is now attempting to come back from zero with sustainable growth. There are numerous coaches and preachers on the internet that preach about positive thinking and how life is all roses if you just care to see it that way. Well, Mr. Faleskini is definitely not one of them. We recommend you ask Faleskini to keep it real. He discusses the darker side of the current economic reality, the side that's more important for your personal and business finance. His first intention is to help you keep what you already have. Not to be a complete party pooper, Mr. Faleskini will also hint at the earning opportunities in the economy today. In order to please the almighty algorithm, please like, share, and subscribe. And now it's time to start taking notes. The mic goes to the podcaster, the one and only Mr. Faleskini.
Thank you, Taylor. In this episode, I will try to explain why does the majority tend to underestimate project management costs. Most of the people get involved in projects in one stage of their life. Business people tend to get involved in projects basically daily or at least regularly. So I believe that project management and specifically budgeting project management cost is a very important topic. I consider myself a seasoned project manager. The biggest project I managed was a 12 billion project, while I had an opportunity to work on a 30 billion railroad project. I was also lead consultant in many EU-funded projects, and I can say that I was successful in most projects. However, I'm guilty also of a few major multi-million-dollar screw-ups. And that is why I'm dedicating this episode to this so important topic of budgeting the project management costs correctly. I will start with definition, add some theory, and then explain on my cases what went wrong and how can you avoid doing screw-ups I did. Of course, I will finish with opportunities for all your listeners so that you can take advantage of the knowledge that you will get that will help you correctly estimate the project management costs. Let's set the frame for this podcast with definitions. Management, the process of dealing with or controlling things or people. Resources, a stock of supply of money, materials, staff, and other assets that a person or organization can draw on to function effectively. Project, an individual or collaborative enterprise that is carefully planned to achieve particular aim. Project management, the process of leading the work of a team to achieve all project goals within the given constraints. Primary constraints are scope, time, and budget. Budget is an estimate of income and expenditure for a set period. I would also like to add my personal definitions, and that is, if a project does not have a budget, is not a project, is just an idea. The budget is always an integral part of every project, by definition. I would also like to add that if you don't have a budget for project management, there will be no project management, since the project will not manage itself. A project without adequate project management and adequate project management budget is doomed to fail. I would also like to stress that my experience shows that an adequate estimate of the budget for project management is 25% of the project. In decades of my work as a project manager on different projects, I've identified that budgeting a project is the biggest challenge for project managers. And budgeting the adequate project management budget is the biggest challenge for the key stakeholder of the projects. So that's why I've prepared an adequate budget theory for you. The adequate budget is budget that enables project manager to cover all expenses and investment necessary for a project to be finished successfully within the given constraints and without negative influence to stakeholders. An adequate budget is a balance that enables project manager to avoid being under budget. Under budget is a waste of time because you will not finish the project successfully or you will not finish the project at all. And you will also need to avoid being over budget because over budget is waste of money. It's the opposite of being efficient. And if I draw a parallel in modern physics, an adequate budget is like a critical mass on the atomic bomb. If you want to initiate atomic reaction, you will need to get critical mass of uranium. And when you initiate nuclear reaction, things will fall in their place and you will be able to use this for a nuclear bomb. Failing to reach the critical mass results in no nuclear reaction. So failing to reach minimum budget for the project will result in project not being finished. So you will not be able to reach break-even point and later profit with your project. If I go a little bit further, an over-budget project is like a fat man. It will probably not starve to death, but will also not get to the goal on time because it's just too fat. The number one reason for corporate projects to fail is the fact that they are over budget and not efficient, so they're always late. An under budget project is like a malnourished man. It will not reach the goal because it will starve to death before that. So the project will not be finished if it's under budget because you will run out of the resources. And this is also the key element to failure of most under budget project is just running out of the resources before you reach your goals. So to stress again, the project budget should always be as low as possible, but never lower. The reality in today's world is that there are much more projects being financed than there are educated project managers. So let's face it, improvisation artists manage 90% of the projects in today's world. And this is not a good sign. The fact is that project management cost is underrated all across the board. And consequently, under-budgeted projects are common. Even the most projects have budget that is too low to manage it efficiently. And especially underestimates for project management are common denominators for most projects today. And also the key reason for a project not being efficient. And not to stay just in theory, let's check two examples from my practice. The first one is we worked in Africa. We had to prepare project documentation for a bigger tender. We've done that 100 times before, and we were really confident that we can do it again. Due to the fact that it was paid by a development bank, we used really hefty or what we thought we used really good estimate so that we would make a lot of money. What seemed to be a big budget at the first glance, 600,000 euros, which was $900,000 at that time, proved to be too small. So what happened on that project is that the project was in Africa, our project management office was in London, and I was living in Switzerland. So travel expenses were mounting really fast. What looked like a $50 a day accommodation in Africa when we were budgeting turned out to be $250 a day. And when we budgeted for rent a car, we didn't know that we would have to get a driver and also a bodyguard. What seemed to be a 3-day visit to Africa turned out to be a 3-week visit because we could not get the same day meetings with all the people in charge. And what we thought was sufficient money for a decent dinner for 4, that was our team, were 4 experts on the ground. It ended up to be dinner for 20 people and a doggy bag for the whole tribe. Yes, On the dinner invoice, there were 25 burgers to go. And that was basically daily. Whenever we were there, the guy that helped us was a tribal leader, and he wanted to take something home for his tribe. So at that time, we had to use normal phones, and what should be a 5-minute conversation over the phone turned out to be a 3-hour call. And that mounted our communication expenses sky high. So what should be easy money turned out to be extremely under budgeted project. And yes, the project has failed. And luckily, I didn't work just on under budget projects. I worked on many over budget projects. And what happened there? We had this team in Switzerland, and our projects were over budget. It was a project development group in Switzerland at that time. So what happened there was that every team member was focusing on his or her hobbies instead of business, because they have so much money at hand due to these projects that they started building houses, they started traveling the world, they start racing cars. And this, of course, resulted in what should be an easy achievable project goals to become project that was extended. We were always in delays due to people doing their private stuff too much and not focusing on the project. So even with all the budget, we could not achieve efficiency. We were extremely inefficient. We were fat men that, of course, we reached the goal, but we were way too late to be profitable. So to sum up, these are the lessons I have learned the hard way, and you should just consume by listening to this episode. Do not underestimate costs in small business and startups. Even if the company is small, the costs are not small. If you want an expert, you have to pay an expert. You cannot get an expert cheaper, because expert can always work for someone else that has an adequate budget. Never underestimate project management costs, because there is no project without project management. And if you cannot pay for the project management, then you will not finish the project. Most people are not talented or sufficiently organized to be able to project manage, regardless of their formal education or certification. And even less of these capable project managers are capable to budget project, to decide on adequate project management costs. And even more, even if they are capable, the stakeholders, usually the owner of the project or owner of the company that is involved, will push to lower project management costs as much as possible. And if project managers are not strong enough, they will end up in under budgeting project management costs. What I learned on many projects is that there are often things that you cannot foresee. So security is key, and security is not cheap. Do not underestimate legal assistance. Do not underestimate insurance. Do not underestimate contingency. It's a key to successful project that you budget for these three things. So let me repeat it. Legal assistance, insurance, and contingency. And very important thing, because the project management has to call shots, so they have to make decisions on the project, is don't send a boy to do a man's job. In order to help you remember the content of this episode, I've chosen 2 quotes. One is, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys to work for you. How I understand this quote and how this relates to this podcast. If you don't budget enough money for the project management team, you will not get best skilled project managers. And this will result in many complications in the project that could be avoided by adequate planning and by adequate execution. And the second, that is really important and really dear to me, is the quote from Bruce Pittman. Don't start waste projects with half waste resources. How I interpret this quote and how this quote relates to today's topic, To start a big project, you need a big budget. The big idea is not enough. You need a budget from day one. For this episode Q&A session, I've picked 4 most common questions I get during my consulting. Let's start with the first one. How can you tell the project is over budget? So when you see that people that work on the project are concerned about what they will do outside the project, they are concerned with their hobbies, with their travel, this might be the clear indication that project is over budget. If you see that the cars that are used on the projects are expensive, if you see that the buildings and other resources are more than what it would be necessary for the project, this is a clear indication that project is over budget. And then second question is, how can you tell the project is under budget? If people on the project talk too much about survival, how they will pay their bills, how things are expensive, how it's hard to get by and similar, this is a clear indication. And also, some people are more closed. However, they will talk about inadequate tools, computers, computer network, communications, and supplies. They will also talk about delays and inadequacy in a different part of the projects. And now we get to the question, how to calculate the proper budget for the project. It's all about lags, delays, possible and foreseen increases in prices, and contingency. This is how you calculate the proper budget for the project. And of course, you have to do that with adequate project manager that will be paid adequately, and the main stakeholder, usually the owner of the project, needs to agree on it. And now, how to calculate project management costs. This is also the number I get often. I would say that 25% of a total project budget is adequate for greenfield projects and startups and similar, something that you start from zero. And 10% is adequate for ongoing projects, so that you just continue managing a project that is already ongoing, everything is set up and similar. Unfortunately, more detailed calculations are beyond what I can explain in a single podcast. Not to talk just about difficulties and problems, I want to finish on a high note with presenting opportunities. Opportunities and possibilities that are in connection with project budget and project management budgeting or costs of project managing. Entrepreneurs. The biggest opportunity is if you spot an under budget project, take it over and increase the budget. You will have a project that is successful. Of course, you need to see some future with it, some synergies with your existing projects, or just opportunity as its own, or market, or that it creates something really useful for the community. And of course, you can also always take over an over budget project that is presenting a loss to existing owner, and the new owner can then increase efficiency and make it profitable, or finish it on time and make everybody that is involved more satisfied than the previous owner. And if you are not an entrepreneur and you are a consultant, you can always help people working on a project, regardless of their status in the hierarchy, to be more efficient. And I think a huge opportunity for consultants is helping stakeholders get adequate funding for their project. I also hope that you learn enough that you can also help them budget their project correctly and budget project management costs correctly. And back to Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Faleskini, for this outstanding podcast. And thank you for listening to the Ask Faleskini podcast until the end. Mr. Faleskini would love to hear your feedback in the comments. And don't forget, if you want to know, ask Faleskini or listen to the Ask Faleskini podcast. In order to please the almighty algorithm, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.